Welcome to your 20-minute ditch. Because at the end of your life, when you look back and look at all the ditches you've dug, you will see two ditches next to each other, and those were the ditches we dug with you, except for a couple of 20-minute ditches. And you wonder where we were, and those are the ditches we dug for you.
Then we didn't have time to dig our own ditch. So basically, you owe us money.
Right. Patreon.com/MightyMur. What are we doing in our 20-minute ditch dig?
We're going to talk about the deadline management, Mur. We're going to talk about deadline management do's and don'ts.
Okay.
And we have 20 minutes on the clock. I have a metronome.
Okay, you're going to talk in, like, syncopation stuff?
Does that sound like a metronome?
No, it does, but it wasn't in rhythm. We're wasting our 20 minutes here. What's really funny is this episode is very important to me because I'm basically going to be talking to myself because I have a deadline on May 7th. It is careening toward me like a locomotive. Yesterday, I was talking about it being April 22nd to my daughter, and she's like, Mom, it's the 23rd. And even though it's only 24 hours, I felt like I'd lost so much. I just had this huge wave of despair that I was one step closer, and I didn't even realize it.
Wow, that was really bad.
Deadline.
That was like a Michael Bay trailer just then, man. That really...
That's right.
Yeah.
Here come the explosions, bitches.
But Michael, those are explosions, not ideas.
Those were the times I blew up stuff for you, my precious child.
And there were two explosions in the sand. No, but so listen, here's the deal. Here's the deal, Mur. Can I tell you what the deal is?
Please. Only if you call me my precious child.
See, it's even creepier without the context.
Matt just read the Footprints poem for the first time before this.
It was very important to Mur that we start this new segment or this new format with a new intro, and she was dead set that it was a play on the Footprints poem. So I had to look
it was so clumsy as shit, so you're welcome.
She was paraphrasing it horribly, so I had to look up the actual Footprints poem, which I'm going to tell you was not any better than she was paraphrasing, by the way. But I read the stupid thing, and we came up with the intro, and that's the story of the intro, and we're wasting even more time by going over this. So here's the deal with deadlines.
Tell me the deal.
Deadlines, Mur, are the fire in which freelance writers burn.
Yes.
I like that a lot, actually. I'm very proud. I mean, I copped it from Star Trek Generations, but whatever. No, but deadlines are the structure of the freelance writer's career. Like, that's what gives us the structure, our career structure. And it doesn't matter what you do. You're a novel writer, you're a screenwriter, you're a nonfiction writer writing articles, comic books, whatever you do, you have a deadline by which you need to deliver your work. And that really defines the professional life of the freelance writer. Would you agree with that statement?
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that statement. A lot of times it's hard to motivate yourself, especially before you're published. And then once you realize that there's going to be somebody waiting at a certain day for a certain amount of work, that is unbelievable drive to put under you.
Yeah. And a lot of people react to that a lot of different ways. You know, some people, like me, it helps me immensely to have an external deadline and to have people waiting for it. I am not good with self-imposed deadlines because I will let other things get in the way, or I will decide that I need to reorganize my action figure collection, and I won't get the shit done. I need to have a deadline. Other authors or other writers find deadlines by other people, paralyzing. They find them very frightful things, and it's a lot of pressure to have put on them. So we respond in different ways. But one thing that is, I think we can universally acknowledge is that even for someone like me who responds well to deadlines, even for the most hardcore blue-collar professional writer, it can be hard to be creative on command.
Yeah.
I think that's always an issue that we have. So especially if you're writing like a novel or a screenplay or a big creative work and you have these deadlines, it's very hard to spontaneously create from nothing on command, and that is what can lead to you missing deadlines or pushing deadlines or hampering your ability to deliver. And delivering on deadlines is, again, a very important quality in this business. So that is what a deadline is. I think we should turn to the do's and don'ts of deadlines. Would you like me to kick it off, Mert? Or
Go
do you
for it.
have? Okay. So when it comes to deadlines, and this is a lesson this is one of the most important lessons I've learned. Do remain open and honest and communicative with the person who is monitoring your deadline, whether it's an editor, a producer, whoever it is. Let's just say editor in this case. Do remain open and honest and communicative with them about the status, about your status, and the projected status of your deadline. Which means if you are coming up on the deadline and you have nothing or close to nothing, I know there's like a lot of romanticism around cramming it all in those last 2 weeks and staying up 24 hours a day and just living on coffee and pizza and getting it done because it has to be done on that deadline or you will never work again. And there's like this romantic idea of finishing it all in a rush and sacrificing your health and your mental well-being to do it. That is a don't as far as I'm concerned. That's the don't that I'm going to offer. Don't do that.
Yeah.
If you have reached an unrealistic place where it's unrealistic that you can healthily get the thing done, you need to be open and honest and communicative with your editor about it and say, look, I found myself in a spot where I wanted to be farther along than I was. I'm not. Let's talk about a new realistic goal to get this done. Your editor, 99.9% of the time, is happy to work with you to figure this stuff out as long as you are honest with them as soon as possible. That's the other thing that I would add to that. Be open and honest and communicate with them as soon as possible about these things. If you're open and honest with them as soon as possible and you just cop to it and tell them this is where I'm at and this is what I need and we need to figure something out, they'll work with you to figure something out. And it won't be as bad as you build it up in your head to be. But it will be so much worse if you just wait until the deadline to have that conversation. That's what I will say. So one of my big do's is do be open and honest and communicative with your editor about where you're at with your deadline. Don't kill yourself to meet an unrealistic deadline if you've fallen behind on one because it's just not worth it. It's not what you want to do, and the work is going to suffer for it. I will absolutely say that as well.
Yeah, I'm mad that you took it. I should have gone first because that's what I was going to say. Because I remember I had a project where I was writing a RPG book with one other guy. I had 25,000 words to do. He had 35,000 words to do. And we were in contact about various things that we were writing about. And then the day before it was due, he said, sorry, I've been blocked this whole time. I can't do it. I'm sorry. And I'm like, well, and I got a hold of my editor and I'm like, did you see the email from dude? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, I'll just sit here and wait for the explosion. And then he got back to me and he's like, so do you think you can write 35,000 words by next week? I said, no. I mean, I try to live by the, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes, but
Right.
Still, I couldn't do that. I took 10 more thousand to help him out, and I'm pretty sure he never worked with that guy again because the guy apparently thought that the block would lift and he would get 35,000 words done in 2 weeks. No, 1 week. No, a couple of days. Oh, tomorrow. Oh, well, I better let them know it's not coming. The thing is, editors have heard this before. Mm-hmm. You are not going to be shocking them or giving them the first slip deadline. So that's why that's a huge reason why it's so important to be honest. I will say, figure out how you work best with regards to chapters versus word count versus time. Because sometimes you can think when you go to your deadline and you work your way back, maybe you think I want to do 1,000 words a day or 1 chapter a day, but get your schedule down and get it going so you can know where you are in the process. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I thought that I've always worked with word count. And
Right.
when I started working on the book for I Should Be Writing, I realized that chapter by chapter was a much better way for me to go. Because it being a nonfiction book, it didn't have as many words as fiction did. And so I found it much easier to compartmentalize my thoughts in this is what I'm going to talk about this chapter. okay, it's done. I'm done for the day.
Right.
Um, and I will add one more thing, which is be honest with your editors if you have conflicts. I have one project I can't talk about, and then I got offered another project I can't talk about, and the timelines conflicted. So I was open and honest with each editor, and actually they work in the same uh, publishing company, so it was very easy for me. But still, letting somebody know what else you have going on if there's a conflict should work in your favor. I'm saying should because there might be the whole, remember in college when you realized that every single professor thought that their test was the most important and they did not give a damn when anything else was scheduled in any of your other classes. But they did care about the athlete. So I don't know
I didn't
what
go to
to go
college,
with
but
that
I assume it's
information.
true.
But
No, it's okay. No, that's a good one. And again, be honest with them as soon as possible about it. Like, don't. I think where you screw up is if you didn't let them know about that conflict right away,
mm-hmm.
and then 3 months later, it's like I didn't get this done because I had this conflict. Don't let them find out about it 3 months after the fact.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst position you can put yourself in. And it's so much worse than missing a deadline. That's what people don't understand. And I didn't understand that for a long time. I'm totally speaking from experience here. I spent so many years thinking the worst thing that I could possibly do was miss a deadline. So I would do anything else to avoid that. But really, just the other stuff is way worse. Like keeping them out of the loop, which leads me to another don't that I wanted to put out there, which is, and you touched on this a little bit more, but I felt it was worth elaborating on, which is don't overpromise. That's another big one. If they say, we really need to have this in a month, your impulse is going to be, okay, I can totally get that done. You need to stop and realistically assess, okay, is that, with everything else going on, is that possible? And if you damn well know it isn't, don't overpromise and tell them that, yes, you will get it done in that time. Because when you don't deliver on it, even if you remain open and honest with them after that fact, you started from a false premise because you knew you were overpromising and you did it anyway. Then when you bring up all these reasons why you weren't able to get it done, their reaction is going to be, well, why didn't you tell me you had all this going on when I asked if you could get it done in a month? Like, that's going to be their first question. And there's nothing but disappointing answers to that question.
Yeah.
So again, that's way worse than just telling them at the outset, you know what, man, I can't, a month is just too soon. I can't do it. Can we push it back a little bit? Here's my realistic timeline. So don't overpromise when it comes to deadlines. You have all the room and all the time in the world before you agree to that deadline. Before you lock that down, there are tons of conversations that can be had and things that can be figured out. But once you agree to that deadline, anything that is not hitting that deadline after that, it becomes really touchy to handle. You want to try to mitigate that as much as possible at the outset. Things can always happen. Things are going to pop up. Situations can change. But as much as you can at the outset, you want to mitigate those kinds of things happening. So don't overpromise, I think is an important one. Do you have another do or don't, Mer?
I think if a very tight deadline is demanded, you have some wiggle room to ask for more money because they are asking not only for your work but for your priority.
That is a good one. I like that one a lot. I like where your head's at.
And they may say no, but they may say yes.
And that is not a mercenary thing to do. You're not holding them hostage. They have a requirement. You have a certain amount of time and energy you are going to have to spend to meet that requirement. And if their requirement is going to demand an extraordinary amount of time and energy from you, you absolutely deserve to be compensated for that. So do take into account the demands of the deadline when deciding your rates for a project. I think it's a perfectly fair and very useful statement, Mer.
Yeah, I remember when I interviewed Paul Cornell several years ago, and he was telling me he was got a what's the word? Sorry.
Trombone.
No, not a trombone. He was exclusive
Chef.
with, I think, DC.
Right.
And I said, you don't have to give me numbers, but do they pay for that exclusivity? Do they not pay? It's like, okay, here's the money we're going to pay you for these comics, but do they also give you more with the promise that you're not going to go anywhere else for work? And he said yes.
Of course, yeah.
If anybody demands exclusivity, that's also something you can definitely ask for more money, because where else are you going to find your money to eat?
Exactly, and everybody needs to eat.
Everybody.
I'm hungry, Mer.
Me too. It's lunchtime.
It's lunchtime for you. It's not even 10 a.m. for me, because you live in the future.
I do. The future's rainy, Matt.
Do live in the future, so you can know what the outcome is ahead of time, and that can inform your decision.
Yeah.
Do invest sparsely but enthusiastically in time travel. It helps everybody out. Where are we on time, Merv? This being our first 20-minute ditch, I've already lost track of time.
16 minutes.
16 minutes. We're doing good. We're rolling along.
Yeah, we are. We're doing real good.
So, I think we can get to closing thoughts on the subject of deadline management.
Deadline management is one of the most important ditches to learn to dig, because it requires organization of the project, but it also requires communication with your editor, and if you're working with anybody on the team. So you just need to keep the lines of communication open and make sure you plan everything out.
That is true. That's also a good point. I wanted to fold that into something earlier and I didn't. So I'll add a final do to my list. Do understand how your deadlines affect other people, because that is one of the biggest reasons you need to be open and honest. And all the things we talked about before, it's not just an editor who's. Let's just take this as an example. This extends to everything, but let's just take writing a novel as an example. It's not just an editor who's waiting on your work. It then has to go through editing. It has to go through line editing, copy editing, proof editing. It has to go through design. They have to get cover illustrations going. There are you don't realize it, but there are dozens of people whose schedules depend on knowing when they're going to get when that editor is going to get your work in. And what really will piss an editor off, it's not even so much that you missed a deadline. It's that affects their relationship with everybody else in all of those departments, and it affects the schedule of all of those departments, and it just makes things really complicated, and they have to reorganize everything. Mm-hmm. And I bring that up because, it's not something you immediately understand as an author, even a published author. Having gone through the process maybe one or two times, it takes a while to fully comprehend the machine of publishing, I think. And part of that is because you're not fully exposed to it. It's not entirely your fault. They don't really bring an author in. A lot of publishers don't really bring an author in deeply to that process. You do your little part of it. You go through your line edits. They send you a cover, and they're like, hey, here's your cover. You're not really involved in that process. But your deadline affects all of that. And that's why it's such a big deal to them. And that's why they get so pissed off when you're unrealistic or when you're dishonest or when you screw things up like that. That's why it's so important to get ahead of it as early as possible and to be as honest as possible. Because they can always reshuffle things far out. But the closer it gets to that deadline that they think you're going to hit, and then you don't hit it, the more complicated and screwed up everything gets. So that's why that's important. So do be cognizant of how your deadline affects other people. Because again, that reflects back onto you. That's a big part of your reputation. That's a bunch of people who are going to have an opinion on your reputation and ability as an author based on how you delivered on that deadline and how you affected their part of that project. And then they're going to all go out in the rest of the industry and they're going to have that opinion and they may share it with people. So that's your reputation too. It factors into a lot of things.
On the other side of that, your schedule will be affected by other people's. So if somebody else slips, you need to let people know that if your copy editor didn't get you edits by the date agreed upon, you should be able to have more time to return those edits than originally on the schedule. So don't be afraid to say, you were supposed to give me 2 weeks to do these edits. Now that you've turned them in, I have 3 days, and that's not acceptable. I can't do it. So don't be afraid to stand up for yourself if somebody else slips.
That's a good don't. I like it, Mer. I like how this whole thing is going. I'm enjoying the 20-minute ditch. I'm enjoying it.
Me too.
So that should bring us, we should be pretty close to the wire.
That's at 20 minutes and 1 second.
There we go. Wrap it up.
wrap it up.
Wrap it up.
Just go check out merverse.com. You can find out all the information about the Ditch Diggers there. Patreon.com/MightyMer. And if you want to find out specifically about Matt Wallace, where do we find you, Matt?
I'm generally on Twitter at Matt F. Wallace, or I'm over on YouTube at Angry Writer doing my weekly vlog.
That's right. And we'll see you next time for a full-length Ditch Diggers.
Look for the ditches in the sand, people.
Yes.
Look for the ditches in the sand.
That is when we dug the ditches for you.
You owe us money.
You can support us at patreon.com/MightyMer.
Ditch Diggers!
Theme song by Devo Spice. DevoSpice.com.